Why pay for the Diabell Star package when you could play one of the best budget decks this format that costs the same price as one Wanted Seeker? What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Cards and Coffee. Today, we're going to be going over my Tri-Brigade Fire King deck, and trust me, you really don't need the Wanted package. This deck is super affordable, plus it'll come with all the stable hand traps and even an access code talker. Make sure you stick around to the end because we're also going to be going over some of the combos that this deck can do. But, of course, before we dive into all that, make sure you grab yourself a cup of coffee or something. That way you guys can sit down and tune in. Alright, this deck really gives you the best bang for your buck. The cost of this game is getting out of control, but there are some hidden gems throughout the format that are very affordable. Oh, and after this video, if you're still looking for other budget options, I just made a video showcasing some amazing budget decks as low as $60. But also, since you're going to be saving all this money, make sure you guys go check out my partners over at Imperium Duelist. I'm actually using their sleeves right now for this video. Trust me, they feel amazing. They actually just dropped a bunch of new product. I love these SP Little Knight sleeves, and these magical hat border sleeves look great on extra deck cards. But also they have new deck boxes. This Demon Slayer box is one of my favorites. And as of January 15th, you can also get this amazing Chainsaw Man deck box. The link to the website will be down below, but make sure at checkout you use my code COFFEE10. Save yourself 10% at checkout, plus a portion of that profit comes back to the channel, helping me make content for you. But now hopping into the monsters, for the first Tri-Brigades, we have of course 3 copies of Fractal alongside 2 copies of Kit. These are the Fire Tri-Brigades, which actually go hand in hand with the Fire Kings, of course. Again, make sure you stick around to the end, that way you guys can see some of the combos these cards offer. But in addition to these, we're also running 2 Nerval and only 1 copy of Karas. I think this is the most streamlined ratio of this engine. Sure, in testing, there are times where a second Karas would be nice, and of course, Kit is a fire, so popping it with Island is really amazing, so maybe you want to play 3. But like I said, I think this is just the perfect ratio, and it lets you fit a lot of non-engine in the deck. But moving on to our Fire Kings, we have 2 copies of Grunix alongside 3 copies of our Kirin. The Fire Kings add such an amazing layer to this deck, not only giving it further extension, but even small interactions like using Kirin to dodge Imperm on something like your Kit really helps push this deck to the next level, and it really is at such a great affordable price. Oh, and as a quick little disclaimer, you're gonna see some higher rarity cards in this deck profile. The cost of this deck is based off the lowest rarities available on TCG Player, but I'm gonna be real, there's a lot of low rarity cards that I've just gotten rid of. But for the last of the Fire Kings, we have 3 copies of Ponix alongside 1 Arvada and of course 1 Barong. 1 Barong is very standard. 1 Arvada, on the other hand, might be a little questionable. We have other ways to get access to it, so I think it's good enough at 1, and I don't want to clog on normal summons. And of course, Ponix is your main starter for this engine, so I want to max out on that, especially since we don't have access to the Wanted package. But again, stick to the end. Make sure you see the combos. They're very easy to get into both engines, no matter which ones you open. But now going into the spells for our consistency card, and again, I don't have commons, so don't hate me, but 3 copies of Tenki to not only search your Fractal to do your Tri-Brigade combos, but it can also grab you that Arvada or even Barong if you really needed it. Another consistency card that I really love is 1 for 1 in this deck, a card that acts very similar to the original Sinful Spoils, but don't forget the Tri-Brigades also have a level 1 in the form of Nerval, so it's a great extender for that engine as well. And then of course we have 2 copies of Fire King Island alongside 2 copies of Sanctuary. You could run 3 if you find that the Fire King engine needs a little more consistency, but I think these ratios are perfectly fine. I'm also running 1 copy of Skyburn as generic removal and a secondary target for your Ponix because we get access to that engine fairly easily. And I guess the last supporting card, it's not a spell, but it's Revolt. It's what you set up going first, and it's such amazing removal in this format right now. But again, one of the beautiful things about this deck is all the room we have for non-engine, and I just love hand traps in this build. Again, pardon the rarities, but of course we're going to be playing 3 copies of Imperm because it's so generically good, and I'm opting to run 3 copies of Effect Veiler. Obviously very similar to Imperm, but these hand traps that you can actually normal summon is something that you can use to make Almirage to convert into a fire. That way you can make your island live if you desperately needed it. Obviously we're going to be playing Ash as well, but one thing that I'm doing is playing 2 copies of Ghost Spell. Right now Labyrinth is very popular, but this also has a lot of application against Fire King as well. Plus transaction rollback is going to be legal very soon, so again, you just want that much more help for that Labyrinth matchup. But also I'm running a single copy of DD Crow. Not only does this help you in a wide variety of matchups right now, but it's also searchable in this deck, so that's really amazing. amazing, but I really think 12 hand traps is a great ratio for this 40 card deck, and for the price of this deck, you really can put up some really amazing boards. But now moving on to the extra deck, for our Link ones, we have 1 copy of Almirage and 1 copy of Anima. Again, these are in those SP Little Knight sleeves. They look so amazing, especially when you pair with the border sleeves. Again, make sure you guys go check them out and help support the channel. But again, the Almirage is something you need not only as a generic fire to set up Fire King Island, but also with the Tri-Brigade cards, there are times where you just need to normal summon Kit and then link it off in Almirage. That way you can start dumping Nerval and search Karas. That's usually for more of your awkward hands, but again, it's good to have it in the extra deck for that option. And of course, Anima, we have the Ponix, we have the Nerval, there's even Effect Veiler as well, so there's a lot of level 1s we have to help convert and remove cards on your opponent's field. But for the Link 2s, we also have the Bearbrum, and of course we have the Farigite. All staple standard stuff. The Bearbrum gets you the trap, and of course Farigite summons from hand and can also help you draw cards. But also one card that I'm opting to tech is the Double Dragon Lords. We definitely have the room because we're not playing SP Little Knight, obviously, and I think this is just a good generic target for your Tri-Brigade cards. And while it isn't always the go-to form of interruption for your first turn board, I do find that in the mid to late game, sometimes you burn through all your Tri-Brigade extra deck monsters, so having another target in deck definitely comes up. But for our last Link 2s, of course, we're playing the 1 IP Masquerena. We don't have SP, but we do have another option to use. And of course, we have Dark and Hida as well. Generic Link 2s to help us link climb not only in the mirror match, but again, we have some Darks in the main as well as Relinquish Anima to help us link climb as well. I know the Tri-Brigades make it to where you can't link using the non-Tri types, but the Fire King cards help you climb, so it definitely helps when pushing against boards. And one card that I have debated on cutting in this extra deck is Celine. You don't play the Dia Bellstar to bring back to set up Access Code Talker, but it's still very easy to set up, and we do have Effect Veiler in the main deck, so while it doesn't come up as often as something like the Dia Bellstar package, you technically have 1-for-1 in the deck as well to get Veiler out. But again, you could always play more Tri-Brigade supporting links as well. But for the last Link 3 we're playing, it replaces the SP Little Knight. It's our Nightmare Unicorn. I know it's nowhere near as powerful, but we gotta do what we gotta do. We gotta save that money, and trust me, this card comes up all the time when going into our first turn board. Plus, it's just good generic removal whenever you need it. It does unfortunately require discarding a card, but for our Link 4s, we also have 2 copies of Omen, one of the best removals in this deck, and I would even argue playing 3 would be smart. There's a couple of things that are cuttable, so definitely test it out yourself. But for the last Link 4s, we also have Appaloosa, the go-to play first turn, and as mentioned, Access Code Talker, the OTK button in this deck that's super easy to set up. And yes, this is about a $40 card, so the fact that this card fits in our budget as well just shows how affordable this deck really is. We have one more card in the extra deck. It's of course the Yang of the Fire Kings. Again, 1 is perfectly good enough. It just adds another interruption on your opponent's turn that's super easy to set up, but I'm sure you guys want to see some of the combos. Let's go ahead and go over them. I think they're really amazing. Alright, so one of my favorite things about this deck is no matter which engine you open with, you have a way to get into the other. In this case, we're just going to have 2 copies of Ponix. It could really be 1 Ponix and any of the other Tri-types. After this, I'm also going to show you when you have just Tri-Brigade cards and how those get you access to the Fire Kings as well. But for this combo, of course, we're going to start off normal summoning our Ponix and using its effect to search. Again, very standard and straightforward for all these Fire King combos. We'll grab Sanctuary and we'll use its effect and go ahead and activate Island. Now, of course, we can use Fire King Island. We can destroy this Ponix and go ahead and search. Just like most of the Fire King lines, you'll add the Garunix and you'll activate its effect to special summon itself. On summon, it'll now destroy a fire, but now instead of destroying something like Barong, we can destroy Kit from the deck because it's a fire beast. This is one of the main interactions between the 2 archetypes, so now we can use its effect to dump Nerval, and then Nerval can go ahead and give us a search. We'll go ahead and pick up Karas, and this is why you needed the other Tri-type, because we used our normal summon, so we want to special it to the field. We'll pitch the Ponix, and now we can use its effect and we'll banish 2 from our grave. Doesn't really matter, just don't banish the Ponix that you destroyed. We want to add that back to our hand on the standby. Bearbrum will now hit the field, and there's a couple of ways you can do this. A lot of the times, people will go ahead and link these off. They'll go into Appaloosa, and then of course the bear will search the trap. Revolt gets added to hand. You put anything back. You'll be able to set this face down, and you can pass the turn knowing that in the standby phase, the Ponix will get added back to hand. Your Appo will have 3 interruptions, plus Revolt can go ahead and summon your Omen. When you do this, you want to make sure you leave at least 1 banished for future follow-up, but the main thing here is you'll use a Nerval. That way you can search follow-up as well. In this case, I'll add Fractal. Of course, you get to banish a card, which is really amazing. And while I think this combo is really nice, this deck can actually go even further. If we rewind back to this point before we banish 2, we can actually use Karas to banish 4. Yes, we're going to lose the Ponix coming coming back to hand, but I'm going to show you it doesn't matter. Now that we've banished 4, Shurg will hit the field, and we can immediately take these 2 and link summon them off. Now we can summon Farigite, and the Omen will activate, and we can search anything that's level 4 or lower. In this case, I'm just going to add a Fractal to hand. Technically, you can add even the Fire King monsters, which is pretty nice and something that does come up in other combos. But now we'll use the Farigite's effect. We'll special summon Fractal from our hand, and of course we can use its effect to now banish 2, and now we can put the Bearbrum on the field. We've opened up some arrows, so now we can take these 2 monsters and we can link them off. This is where we'll make IP Masquerena, and I think it's pretty straightforward. We can link these 2 off and then go right into our Appaloosa. Appo now only has 2 negations, but we also gained IP Masquerena. Of course, we'll get to add Revolt and put any of these cards back on the bottom of the deck, but one thing to note is not only do you get the trap, but you also get an additional draw with Farigite, and of course you put a card back into the deck as well. This helps you dig for more hand traps if you didn't already have it, but also on your opponent's turn when you use Revolt, you'll be able to bring it back as well because we did properly link summon it. And while it's great because it does get you more hand traps, what you're really hoping to draw into is a copy of Kirin if you didn't already open it, because now once you resolve this Revolt, obviously you're going to go ahead and make Omen, but in the process you're going to use one of the Nervals from your banish zone, and it'll let you get a search as well. So obviously you'll get the banish, and of course you have 2 negates with Appaloosa. Also, if ever you need to, IP can link off with Omen. We don't have SP, but we have the Unicorn, and we can discard a card to bounce a card if we needed to. Don't worry that you discard the Tri-Brigade because you have Omen now that can search a level 4. Sometimes you'll have to fire off Kirin earlier, but if you didn't, now you can add Arvada. And now if somehow your opponent is continuing to play, you can use the Kirin destroying the Arvada. Garunix will now bring itself back to the field, and you can destroy another Kirin from deck. This is crazy because now not only do you get this monster effect negate back from the grave, but Kirin will pop another card as well. Hypothetically, if the Ash wasn't in hand and you kept something like the Tri-Brigade kit in hand, now you also have a fire negate in your hand without having to use the monsters on field. I mean, obviously Ash is a fire, but that's besides the point. It could be literally anything. But if by somehow your opponent can continue to play, then you can use the effect of Sanctuary, go into the other Garunix. We can now wipe the field, and of course Arvada will trigger as well. We don't have Barong, so it doesn't really matter, but you can bring back the chicken because we brought it back when we went to use the Revolt. I don't see how your opponent continues to play, so at the end of the turn this will get destroyed. You'll go ahead and you'll draw for a turn, and of course the Ponix will add itself back afterward as well. One quick note though is in that combo, instead of adding the kit as the other Tri-Brigade, you probably should have just added Fractal. Keeping kit in the deck is actually really important because now on your next turn, just by going and resolving Fire King Island, it won't matter what you destroy. If you detach the Garunix to the grave, or you added the second copy from your deck to your hand, the Garunix can then special summon itself, and then of course use its effect to dump that other kit and dump Nerval to search another Tri-Brigade and continue playing from there. Pretty crazy for a deck that only costs like 130 bucks, right? So what do you do if you only have Tri-Brigades? In this case, we have access to Fractal and any of the other Tri-types. In this case, it's just going to be another copy of Fractal, but of course we're going to use its effect and we're going to discard it to send one from deck to grave. Obviously, we'll dump Kit, which will then dump Nerval, and then that will add the Kuras to hand. This will now special summon itself to the field and put the fourth one in the grave. It's very important because now we can use its effect to banish them all. Shurg can now hit the field, and then we can immediately link them off and go right into our Bearbrum. Omen will now activate. We can search anything that's 4 or lower, but in this case, we're going to go ahead and grab Ponix. This is how the Tri-Brigades tie into the Fire King, so it's really amazing to see how both of these engines work together. Now we can normal the Ponix and do as we did last time. We'll add Sanctuary and then use it to activate Island. And just like last time, we'll use the Island to destroy Ponix. We'll add the Garunix and then special summon it to the field. And usually this is where you would dump something like Barong, because normally you would go ahead and link these two off and then make something like SP. But again, we don't play that. Unfortunately, we have to go ahead and go a little bit further. We still will destroy the Barong. That way we can get the Kirin on our opponent's turn. But now we'll use our Bearbrum's effect. We'll discard 2 cards to bring back one that's banished. In this case, I'm going to summon Nerval, and then I'm going to use its effect. We'll go ahead and banish 2. We don't want to banish the Ponix or the Barong. But once again, we'll go ahead and make ourselves the Blossom. Here you could technically go into double Dragon Lords and then use these to go into Appaloosa. But in this case, I'm going to use these 2 to go into our IP. Even though we don't get the benefit of SP, this is still really great at linking our Omen off on our opponent's turn to potentially search DD Crow. Again, I don't think either of the scenarios is incorrect, but we're going to go ahead and link these off. We'll once again make Appaloosa. In this case, it's just for 2. Bearbrum will activate. now we can go ahead and grab the trap. We'll go ahead and put the last card in our hand back. We'll set it face down, and then of course we'll pass the turn. And then on our opponent's standby phase, not only do we go ahead and get the Barong search, but we get the Ponix back to hand as well. This is great because we got into our Kieran combo without having to draw into it with our Farajit. But again, you have double Appaloosa for negates, and then of course at any time you can now activate Revolt. Again, I usually try to leave at least 4 banished, but it doesn't really matter. You'll summon a bunch back and then immediately link them off. Shuriq will get to banish a card, and of course Nerval allows you to search as well. Like I said before, it's probably best to add the Fractal, leave the kit in deck. At any time we can fire off this Kieran, but also we have the IP to link off with the Omen. Again, now Unicorn hits the field. If you needed to, you can ditch the card from hand. You can spin something back, and of course Omen activates as well. Like I said, I like leaving 4 banished because depending on the matchup, you can always add something like DD Crow for another interruption, or if you feel like you're going to need another monster effect negate, now you can add Arvada, and if your opponent continues to play, you can use the Kieran, you can pop that Arvada. Now both Arvada and the Garunix will activate. Garunix will hit the field, and Arvada brings back Barong, which is nice because that gives us more follow-up. Now the Garunix will activate. We can go ahead and destroy another Kieran in deck. Kieran will now pop a card on our opponent's field, and the Arvada comes back as another monster negate, and we have all the fires in the world to use it. And of course, if by somehow your opponent still is continuing to play, you can go into the big chicken with Sanctuary and you can wipe the field. I don't know how your opponent plays through all of that, but come your next turn on your standby phase, you'll also go ahead and get that Barong effect. Honestly, it doesn't matter what you add to hand because now you can normal summon a Ponix, you can grab the quick play spell, you can pop Island, grab this second copy of Phoenix if you can't detach it. You're just set up to go off on your next turn. Trust me, this deck is so much fun to play. But that's gonna wrap things up for today's video. Thanks again for tuning in. I really appreciate all the support. Again, make sure you guys go check out Imperium Duelist. The link's down below. They have so many amazing products and some new ones that have just dropped. But once again, thanks for tuning in, and here's hoping to see you on the next one. Peace.